Well, let's cross to Leeds now. Richard Burgon, who is Labour's Shadow Justice Secretary, and he joins us this evening. Richard Burgon, welcome to BBC News. We know only a limited amount about what's actually going on inside. What are your first thoughts now that this part of the prison, at least, seems to have been out of the authorities' control for 9 hours?
Well, the situation is developing and the situation is deeply worrying. And at this time, our first thoughts have to be how the situation is going to be stabilised. So I'm worried about the safety of prison officers. And I'm also worried about the safety of prisoners as well. There have been reports coming out, not yet verified, of a prisoner seriously injured and of a prison officer threatened with a used hypodermic needle. I don't know the accuracy of those reports, but it's a deeply worrying situation, both for prisoners and for prison officers as well.
We don't know what was the catalyst for this particular incident. As you say, we know less than we, if you like, we don't know more than we do know at the moment at this stage. Perhaps that's not surprising. But there have been concerns raised by the Prison Officers Association about staffing levels in jails in England. And there have also been an acknowledgement by the Justice Secretary Liz Truss that there's been difficulty in recruiting sufficient staff. Is that enough of a justification for prisoners to behave in this way?
Well, HMP Birmingham, where the disturbance or the riot has taken place today, is the prison with the most assaults on staff in the whole of Britain. There's clearly a problem at this privately run prison that's run by G4S, just as there are problems in prisons across the country that are in the public sector as well. But there is a staffing crisis in our prisons. Labour have repeatedly raised this in Parliament and elsewhere. There's been a cut of 6,000 prison staff since 2010, and whilst the Secretary of State Liz Truss has announced 2,500 extra prison staff to be recruited, that's 2,500 extra after a cut in the first place of 6,000, and such are the levels at which prison officers are fleeing and leaving the prison service as prisons become ever more violent, that to get 2,500 extra prison staff would require 8,000 extra prison staff being recruited because retention rates are so poor. What we've got is a situation where there are more experienced prisoners in our prisons and more experienced prison officers leaving the prison service.
You say as our prisons become ever more violent. I mean, that's quite a generalisation. There are a lot of prisons who are working very effectively, and arguably we've seen fewer large-scale riots in our prisons than in the last 20 years than we had in the years before that. In many ways, the quality of the prison service has got better.
Well, violence in our prisons doesn't just take the form of riots which make it on the news. I'm afraid that assaults on prison staff and assaults by prison inmates and other prison inmates are a daily occurrence. The situation is unsafe in our prisons, and prison officers are going into work knowing that there's a significant chance that they're going to get punched, attacked, spat at or abused, and they're also worried that they're not able to take care of the safety of inmates in there as well. So there is an increase in violence in our prisons, I'm afraid, and violence is a day-to-day fact in our prisons. It's not just the case that we should only look at the safety in our prisons when there are riots or major disturbances. There's a problem on a day-to-day basis that we need action from the government on staffing in order to tackle.
Richard Burgon, Shadow Justice Secretary, thanks very much for being with us on BBC News this evening.